claiming psychedelic mushrooms can change the world. He's James Jesso, the host of Adventures Through the Mind podcast, and he joins me now.
So that happened. Hey, what's up, everyone? James Jesso here, Adventures Through the Mind. As you just saw, I was recently on Fox News. I mean, many of you have probably already seen this. If you haven't, there will be a link to the video in the show notes to this video, which I'll have at jameswjesso.com, along with some other stuff you'll hear about as this video goes on. But I figured it would make sense to maybe explain what my experience was like, because I certainly wasn't expecting to be interviewed on Fox News. And I guess many of you don't expect to ever be interviewed on Fox News, and we all sort of have an idea about what Fox represents, whether we're for it or against it. Personally, I've been kind of against it insofar as like what it represents for our current era and what it says and what it represents insofar as the industry of journalism at this time in our history. In this video, I want to talk about essentially how this came about and how I prepared myself, what my thoughts on the interview are currently, as well as some areas that I feel like I could have done better. So starting out with how this came about. I randomly got an email from someone who works for Waters World, Jesse Waters' Fox News show, asking me if I wanted to be on to talk about the decriminalization of mushrooms in Denver. And this is before it was official. It was when it was still like, oh, it wasn't decriminalized, the vote failed, but then we found out later the vote didn't fail. I mean, anyways. So I get the message, would you like to be on the show? And all these red flags start to go up. Like, is this legit? For example, are they just going to fuck with me, try to make me look like a fool? And I had all these reservations because it's like, I don't know, I've got a pretty negative view of what Fox represents. And when I took a look at his show, I was like, oh, I mean, it looks like he's just going to maybe just bring me on to make a mockery of me. And I, A, don't want to be a mockery for the psychedelic community, and B, I don't want to be a mockery like of everything that I've worked for that's dear and good in my life insofar as my professional achievements. Instead of saying all of that in the email, which my immediate inclination was this radical honesty, I just said, yes, absolutely. Can you tell me more information? And I released a Facebook post on my personal page that was confined just to people who are my friends, asking like, whoa, this is the situation. What do you think I should do? The resounding answer was, yes, go for it. I got a lot of advice. Some people were like, no, screw them. They're a force of evil in the world. I mean, no one said that specifically, but that was the inclination. But ultimately, the vast amount of people were like, yeah, go for it. And I thought to myself, yeah, I should go for it because I'm going to get a chance to talk to a demographic that I otherwise would never talk with because we just don't hang out in the same echo chambers, right? So it seemed like a good idea, but of course I was still very conscientious that I didn't want to be made a mockery of. The email communication between me and Waters's, I guess, media rep, I think the word I'm looking for is content manager, perhaps. And, it was all very respectable. I was supposed to have a pre-interview. I had several questions like, what's your slant? How are you going to address this? Why are you choosing me? I had all these questions. I was like, you know what? These questions don't matter. I could ask them during the pre-interview, but the pre-interview didn't happen. They just sent me a list of questions that they may not ask me, questions that they wanted my answers to so they could get a sense of how to ask me questions I wouldn't know what they'd be before it happened. And I thought, oh, this is maybe because they want to trick me up or slip me up or whatever, which if you saw the interview, I mean, there's a sense of perhaps that happening. But I sent my answers to them. In fact, I've contained them in the blog entry to this video on jameswjesso.com. There's a link in the description to read them, or you're already on the site. Cool, read them there. And then I was told I'm going to record on Friday afternoon and it'll air on Saturday. A big concern for a lot of people was that it would be cut and mixed up in a way that would make me look like an idiot no matter what I said. And I in the communications with them, I didn't think that's what's going to happen because they told me they were recording live. And when I looked at some of the clips from Waters' show, I realized like I'm not it seems like they're bringing me on as somebody to interview, not like his little clip sessions that he does where he gets random sound bites from people and mashes them together in a ridiculous way. So I thought, okay, then perhaps this is going to be all right. I'll just set up to record. Now, before I started to record, there's a few things I did in preparation. Of course, one of which was really helpful was answering those questions that I was sent in advance, because it gave me a sense of what it is I wanted to talk about, what the slant was. And I chose to make my slant, the particular things that I would focus on as the talking points, ones that would be relevant to a Republican, a Republican demographic. So particularly the reduced unnecessary spending of tax dollars and personal liberty and low harm, essentially, were the three things I was going for, while always wanting to leverage towards scientific studies and less towards opinion, more towards verifiable evidence. So I had my talking points ready, and I also, another thing that was really important in having watched some of Waters' interviews in the past and some of the advice I got, which was to answer the questions in reference to my talking points, not to respond to what he's saying. Because if you watch the interview, you can see that he's saying things that are sort of like agitating or aggravating, or possibly, like implicitly or explicitly insulting to the very nature of my position, or the very nature of the topic itself, sort of like delegitimizing the topic by making it a bit of a mockery or a joke. And that if I had wasted time responding to those things rather than answering the questions directly to my talking points, then I would have wasted the time. We had like 4.5 minutes. That's not enough time for me to have a real conversation. I needed to stay on point. So that was another one too. Another preparation thing that I had in consideration was, of course, to present myself nicely. I took my nose ring out, I took my earrings out, and wore, headphones that sort of covered up the big floppy holes in my ears, and put my hair back, put a button-up shirt on, so look respectable. I also went to a friend's house to do it, not only because it was nice to be in that type of environment. They helped me set up a really nice background and stuff, but also because I wanted to have some friends to talk with, warm up with, because sometimes speaking can be like kind of slow, like at first. So to warm up a bit, and also to ground me, because I was so nervous. Oh my God, I was so nervous, because it's like, of course, I've never been on a network television show or national TV, and I'm going to be on national TV to a bunch of people who, I assume right away don't agree with my opinion. And also, like, this is a great opportunity for me, publicity wise, and insofar as my career, but then also I'm a representative of a whole culture that's like a part of my heart and soul, and I didn't want to do y'all wrong, you know what I mean? So there was just so much pressure, and I think I would have been like an erratic mess if it hadn't been for going to my friend's house and having them help me prepare, help me ground, in the sense of like staying calm. I had my friend Alex was like, rubbing my chest and back and just like helping me breathe before we started, because I was just so nervous. And also a final thing that I did in preparation before we did the actual interview is that a friend of mine named Dustin, he said, "Hey, look, I'll help you prepare." And he's a trained martial artist. So the way he helped me prepare was to get set up to put himself in a position as if he were a Fox News anchor whose goal was to completely delegitimize me. And we got on a call. I didn't realize I kind of had the sense that that's what he was going for, but I didn't realize how intense it was going to be. So within 5 seconds on the call, I thought I was going to catch up with him and be like, "Hey friend, how's it going?" But he just like railed into me super hard and had incredible arguments that like there was nothing I could do, not to have him delegitimize me, but I just had to hold it together as best as possible. And it was super intense and super anxiety provoking. And after that, I was like, well, I watched the interviews with Jesse Waters. I've seen the way he interviewed people on topics like cannabis and psilocybin previously. And although he's mocking, he's not aggressive and like violent in his communication. So after that, I was like, well, if it's even 75% of that, I'm going to be fine, because that was super intense. And I really appreciated it, because when the actual interview went forward, although I was nervous, and he was being confronting in his mockery, I didn't feel confronted, because A, I knew that was part of his character. I knew it was coming. B, I had my talking points ready to point to. C, I knew that I wasn't going to respond to what he was saying, but to answer his questions according to my talking points. And again, it was so much less intense than my preparations with Dustin. And I had my friends around me that were like lovingly supporting me. And all of you guys, especially the people who knew I was doing this in advance, were so supportive of me doing it. So yeah, I went forward with it. And I mean, so far the responses have been really positive, and that's amazing. Thank you. So when I look back at how the interview went, I think there are things that I wish I'd done differently, and then there's another thing I want to point to. The thing I want to point to is that a lot of people, it seems like, are really against Jesse Waters, and I don't know really anything about this guy except for some preliminary investigations, watching some clips from his show, and essentially getting a sense of how he represents himself. So I'm not here to defend or protect him as like a whole person or a cultural force in any way. But a lot of people are looking, oh, he just tried to make a fool out of you, and, like blah, blah, blah. And that I appreciate that many of you said that I made him look foolish by being so stoic or professional, because thank you for saying I looked so professional. But one of the things I think a lot of these people are missing is that that's the character Waters is playing. He needs to play that character. That's the character those people, his demographic, excuse me, not those people. That's the character they expect. That's the character they enjoy. That's why they're watching, really. They either they like it or they hate it, but either way, they're entertained. So of course he was going to act that way. And in looking at the other situations where he has represented this topic, and especially the cannabis topic, although some of it's very mocking, obviously, in his questions, the way he responds are very mocking, I think he actually handled it quite respectfully, because even though he was mocking it, he was still asking legitimate questions, even in this sort of like delegitimizing way, and giving me space to answer. Also, however, this is a point I should have mentioned earlier, about preparing, was to not stop talking as soon as he interrupted, because I knew he would do that, because he has to focus on his time frame. He is like coordinating this 4.5-minute interview for national television. He's got to be boom, boom, boom. But if I stop talking immediately upon his interruption, then I look submissive. And if I overbearingly talk and not give him a space, then I look, arrogant. So finish saying my statement and then, pause and let him speak. Anyway, so looking back, it's like, I think he handled it pretty respectfully, because he gave me a space to speak. He gave me the platform. And a couple people have made mention about this. Like, yeah, he played his character, but he also gave me space to speak. And obviously his content team selected me. If they wanted somebody that they could make a fool out of and would look ridiculous, then they wouldn't have picked me. They would have picked somebody who it would be a lot easier to make a fool of. So I think perspective needs to be given there. And in this specific circumstance, some credit given to Waters and his media team. Not to say that I don't know anything about his larger political agenda, so I'm not speaking about him fundamentally or his role fundamentally as a public figure, but this particular incident or this particular interview. And then another piece of the things that I think I could have done better, essentially. Like I said, I was so nervous. I was so nervous that it took every part of me not to be like shaking and looking stressed. I was taking these deep breathing, trying to like really feel myself sitting in the chair I was in. And because of that, I didn't smile like at all. Like you saw the interview, I was very serious the whole time. And typically I'm a pretty like happy looking guy, I think. So I didn't smile at all. And that's something that I regret, although it made me look very professional. It also, I think, made me look like a little bit of a hard ass. I imagine most of you don't care or don't mind, but some of you had messaged that something along the lines of, you didn't recognize me without a smile. So that was that. And another thing is, because I was nervous, I think I sort of botched the first question. I mean, a lot of you were like, oh yeah, cool. I mean, I think you did well. But when he asked me about, what do people believe? I did two things. Well, he asked me about, what does Denver people believe? Is it just a stunt? Like, what is this? And I said, I'm not associated with the Denver group, but we believe. So I kind of like said, I'm not associated, but I'll speak for us as a larger culture. And I could have been more clear that what I believe and many of the other people in psychedelic culture believe is not blah, 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 but it's scientific evidence. And then when I mentioned the scientific evidence, I made the mistake of saying depression, trauma, and OCD. Now, trauma and OCD might be anecdotally supportive, and if you go deeper into the investigation about the sort of the roots of depression in general, it's fair to say that when it treats depression, it's treating trauma. But there isn't, as far as I know, much scientific evidence to support that. I would have been better saying depression, end of life anxiety, and then mention the sort of statistical evidence that has been taken from people who generally use it about intimate partner violence and suicidality. So that was a mistake. I feel like I could have better represented the science, and I didn't. Finally, I really wanted to get Psilocybin Service Initiative of Oregon mentioned in that interview, and I did, but the way I formulated my answer to the question that enabled me to bring it up made it hard to hear, because it was a point where he was talking over and hard to understand what my statement was, or he was interrupting to prepare for the next question. And I have remorse about not being able to more clearly state the Psilocybin Service Initiative of Oregon for their larger constituency of listeners, because it's such an amazing and important project insofar as psilocybin services, but also the painfully slow dismantling of the war on drugs in the United States and globally. So now it's over. It's done. A huge amount of shares. Thanks, everyone. It was like amazing. People coming out of the woodwork with like, yeah, my man, James Jesso. Like, thanks. Like, that's amazing. I felt so supported and so acknowledged, because I was super nervous. Like I said, I didn't want to let myself down by any means. And I didn't want to become a mockery by any means, although I expected a lot of you would probably forgive me if I botched that, because, I mean, as you can imagine, it's a pretty stressful situation. But I've been getting a lot of positive feedback that I represented the culture well, and I feel honored to hear that. And I feel honored to have had the opportunity. And I feel positive about it. I also feel a little bit concerned. I'm like, what's going to come of this? Of course, there was this massive flush of shares, and now it's just dying off. I had several people who, otherwise aren't like psychedelic or drug positive people, message me saying they appreciated my argument and looking forward to following my work from here on. I don't know if it's going to be a big jump in my like my stats or people listening to the podcast, which would be amazing, because I mean, it'd be awesome to get people who otherwise would never be confronted with any of this information to then turn into my podcast because they saw me talking about mushrooms on Fox News, and then start finding stuff about like basically being a better person and unraveling trauma and the kind of stuff that we talk about on the channel here and on the podcast. But I mean, maybe it just fades into the background and everything just renormalizes to what it was before, which is also totally fine. Maybe I get more interviews. Awesome. Maybe I get put on a list. Now I'm on a list for CSIS or the FBI or the CIA or whoever it is that watches people who might be activists. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, all in all, I feel really positive about the experience, and I feel really positive about the amount of support I've been getting from you guys, from y'all peoples, the psychedelic community. So thank you very, very much. Of course, this channel is brought to you by Patreon and the voluntary donations of people who just like support it. So thanks for being a patron if you are one, and becoming one if you're not. If you want to support otherwise, you could just drop a PayPal donation or buy a t-shirt. I'm wearing one right now. Actually, this is the older design. The design is the same, but it's got a better fabric and fit now, and a little emblem on the side. Anyways, you could buy a t-shirt or a copy of one of my books about psilocybin mushrooms. All of that can be seen at jameswjesso.com/support, which is going to be on the page if you're on jameswjesso.com already, or just in the YouTube comments below. Be sure to head over, if you're not already, in jameswjesso.com to check out those questions and answers. There's some cool stuff in there that didn't get talked about in the actual Fox interview because it was like 3.5, 4 minutes. It's not a lot of time to talk about stuff. And yeah, thank you for subscribing to the channel. I'm looking forward to producing more content for you guys and just following this journey, and it's y'all peoples that allow me to do this, like financially with my patrons, the donations and the purchasing of things. That enables me the time to invest into the reading, the writing, the studying, content creation, to even be able to get to a point where I could represent the community well. So huge thank you to all of you. And I might be rambling a little bit at the end. Hey, do you like my new camera? I got a new camera. Thanks to everyone who's been supporting the show, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to save up for this new camera. So awesome. Thank you. And I'll see y'all in the next episode of Adventures Through the Mind. Bye.